So this panel is about winning in China, and we're fortunate to have two men this morning who are doing just that. So thank you for being here. Brito, let me start with you. You've got 20% of the beer market here in China, and for you it's a very fast-growing business and a very profitable business. How do you do it?
Well, first, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. Here in China, we started 30 years ago. But really, 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, better saying, we decided to shift our strategy and really focus on the high end of the market, which today seems obvious, but at the time, it was not obvious at all. It was a big bet because the high end of the market in terms of beer was very, very, very small, but that were where the margins were. So, and today, looking back, was the best thing we did. Today, we have 20% of the total market, but in terms of the high-end market, we have more than 60%. And in terms of profitability, we're the #1 brewer in China by profits, by far. And that's because we had a long-range plan. We had the patience to continue to invest in local talent, continue to understand consumer insights, and bet that the demographics in China would change in such a way with the middle class growing and that the consumers would tend to trade up. And we built those brands up here, and consumers are coming towards our brands as opposed to us, other players that are chasing consumers up.
So you operate all over the world. You're in 50 different markets. Talk about what distinguishes the Chinese market. What makes it harder? What makes it easier? What makes it different?
I think China is one of those markets where averages can hide everything. So in China, you really have to go province by province, location by location, because there are many different Chinas. It's such a continental-sized country. So in the southeast, of course, consumers have different level of requirements. Channels are different by which you sell the products. For example, in China, e-commerce is developing way ahead of other countries. So channel mix is something that in the last 30 years we saw channels pretty much disappearing, some others emerging big time. So that's something you have to pay attention to China. Averages can hide a lot of interesting things.
Henry, how long have you been investing in China?
We started investing here in about 2005. And today we're running somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 billion a year of equity we're putting into the country. When we started here, we looked at one thing. We looked at what is needed. And in those days, everything was needed. And so we could almost pick and choose where we wanted to put capital. Now, it's not just we put the money in and hope it turns out all right. We really operate, and we focus very much on operations. For example, one of the things that the government needed very badly was to improve food safety and security. Second thing they needed, which was improvement in the environment and water safety, et cetera. So we said, okay, let's look and see what we can do. So can we team up with somebody here? And we did. We teamed up with Mungu Dairy. Worked with them to set up a farm, a state-of-the-art farm, after the melamine problem here with milk being tainted. And we ended up starting with one farm, 10,000 cows, and by the time we finished the investment, we had 26 farms, about 270,000 cows. What we did was, with them, just using that as an example, we started by looking at, okay, what does the dairy industry look like in China? What is needed? Well, the state-of-the-art was missing. And so we brought in technology, we brought in management, we trained the leaders of these different farms on nutrition, on breeding, on improving the yield. So we improved the yield, for example, per cow of 26%. We cut down the bacteria rate in the milk by 80% from what it had been. And so it was a real value added. I always like to say in investing, it's not a still shot. It's not a picture. It's a movie, and it just continues to go on. And what can you do with the business? Other areas that were of great interest to us, besides the ones I mentioned, the consumer. The consumer needed and wanted everything, particularly as they were moving from the rural area to into the city. And so we started focusing on companies where we could help the consumer. It could be in consumer finance. It could be in the stock market by investing in a company called CICC, and so forth. And then just to finish, the other area that we're now focusing on, as the country has gone from low value add to much higher value add, we're focused much more today on those companies that need our help in the higher value add, and technology innovation is certainly part of that area.
Can you give us an example of an investment in that area where you found an opportunity?
Well, sure. Ushan is one, which is the largest car auction business in China. That's one. 58 Home is another one that we have invested in, which is very similar to, in the U.S., Craigslist, where you need a plumber, you need an electrician, you need anything that will fit into you can do it online. We do career training, IT focused primarily on an education, both in classroom and online there.
You said there were lots of opportunities in 2005. Is it getting harder to find those opportunities in 2017
Not
for private equity?
Just different.
Just different.
In other words, what used to be, it was like shooting fish in a barrel almost. Today, yes, obviously in the technology area, you have to believe in the growth because the valuations for some of these growth companies are huge. On the other hand, if we can invest in a company, any company, and feel that we are bringing value add and can prove the operations, put metrics in, help these companies expand overseas, which is really important. I've always said to young companies, I say it all over the world, I said, look, money's a commodity. You can get money everywhere, but why don't you get money from people that bring more than just the money? They bring some value add to it. And that's helped us because we're sitting today, and it varies a little bit from time to time. Today we've got about 125 different companies in our portfolio, a lot of different industries around the world. So if somebody says, I'd like to expand around the world, we can help them there, and we help them bring governance, best practices, et cetera.
Brito, you said you succeeded by targeting the top end of the market, and so you rode this great wave of affluence that we've seen over the last decade. How long can that continue?
Well, if you compare the high-end segment in our business here in China with other countries, there's still lots to be done. What Henry is saying about the economy being more based on value-added activities, this is very important to us, play well to our strengths, because you have people with more purchasing power looking for experiences. The insight is that consumers everywhere, and China is the same thing, people look for more than products, they look for experiences. So very important to provide consumers with entertainment, where beer and beverages and food is at the center of it, but participating well with other arts, music, sports.
And you're doing that.
Oh,
right?
yeah, we do that all the time.
You're becoming an entertainment
producer.
Yeah,
big time. I mean, one example, we sponsor on a global basis events like the World Cup, FIFA World Cup. We sponsor Tomorrowland, Wimbledon, so many others. And live streaming, for example, in China is big. For example, the last Tomorrowland that takes place in Belgium, it's a global event for EDM, electronic dance music. It's one of the most popular ones. And in China, the streaming was done for the first time 2 years ago. And last year, it had 70 million people in China, consumers watching live from Belgium, the streaming. And this year, next year, 2018, the World Cup, which happens every 4 years, Budweiser is the global sponsor, and we do lots and lots of streaming in China and around the world. So, it's something that consumers are looking for, experience more than just a product.
What's your best-selling beer in China?
Budweiser.
It is Budweiser.
Budweiser, yeah.
But a lot of your success has been with more sort of craft beers here, right?
Yeah, craft and local beers. We started with local beers as a base volume scale to get Budweiser on top of it. And now we have what we call the super premium, which is on top of Budweiser. So we have Corona, we have Stella Artois, we have Leffe, we have Beck's, we have Hoegaarden. So all these beers that sell for double the price. So again, consumers are looking, as channels go from the traditional nightlife, KTV channel in China to more Western type channels for entertainment, the product mix also evolves, and consumers are willing to pay a higher price because the experience is one that they are looking for.
Do you own a lot of Chinese craft beers?
We do own a couple of them, but again, China is big on imported brands as well.
Yeah.
And imported brands, we're the #1 company around the world because we operate in so many countries to bring those imported brands to China.
Yeah. So, Henry, I want to ask you the same question about how long this can last. I mean, trees don't grow straight to the sky. It's been an incredible run, but you have to think at some point there's going to be a break in the growth pace. Do you see that anytime soon?
You talk about in China?
In China.
Well, you know, one can argue that they've already had a severe correction. They were growing at 12%. Now they're growing at 6.5 or so percent. You know, that's a huge correction in anybody's mind. But I think they can keep this going for a long time here. You know, the huge population. And again, I say, as long as they can focus on their financial institutions, which is really key, and not let that get out of control, keep the social harmony that's important to the government, I think they can go for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Alan, if I can add one thing to what Henry is saying, yes, the country is growing at 7%, but that again is an average. If you look at some parts of the population and what they're buying and what they're consuming, the high end is going way ahead of that.
Much faster than that.
Much faster than that. So for us, we're still very bullish that there are many ways to continue to uptrade consumers. You can, go from mainstream to mainstream plus. You can go to premium. You can go to super premium. You can go to prestige. So I mean, the number of ladders that consumers are willing to take once they have purchasing power is almost.
But everything is in different size here,
yes.
You know, and you know, we think of different scale than you have. So I met with the CEO of a wonderful company, Meitao, a few days ago, and I asked him. I said, "So how many food deliveries do you have a day?" And he said, 16 million, but we're just starting to scratch the surface. 16 million. There's no company that has 16 million for the week in the U.S.
Brito, your company is known for its strong management practices. Is management different here in China than it is in other countries in the world?
No, it's the same principles, just faster. I mean, in China, you have to think long term, like we think in other countries. But in China, you really have to take that seriously because, again, we invested in a segment that didn't exist 15 years ago, and today is the name of the game. So you have to have patience, resilience. You have to hire the very best. And in China today, you have lots of Chinese that go abroad, study, they come back. So we're always hiring Chinese in the U.S., in U.S. schools, and they want to come back to China because they see opportunities. And the Chinese talented people, they want to also join companies where they see a purpose. And beer, in that respect, being a very community-centered product, because you hire locally, you source locally, you produce locally, you sell locally. We're very involved in whatever it has to do with the community, environmental issues, impact on the environment, water. I just came back from Putian in the Fujian province 2 days ago, where we opened one of our biggest breweries in the world 2 days ago with the government. We had a ceremony, and it's a very high-tech brewery, and it's the one with the best metrics in terms of water, heat, energy, recyclability. And that's all because we partner with the government. For example, we are one of the first companies to partner with the government to do what they call the river chief, in that you adopt a river, and together with the government, you try to take care of that water quality.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I don't know if you heard Jack Ma yesterday. He said the last century was about making money, and this century is about doing good for business. It has to be a bit of an overstatement. Making money is obviously still important. But is there something going on there that the two of you detect where businesses feel it becomes more important to show your customers and show your employees that you're doing good in the world?
I think you have to do both. I mean, I think this tyranny of or, either you do this or that, that's what it's gone. I think today consumers want you to have, of course, products, innovation, all that, but they want to know what you stand for. They want to know what the company behind the products, what that brand stands for. So our global brands, for example, are very clear in what they stand for. Stella Artois, for example, our global brand is all about water. Corona is all about beaches and cleaning ocean. And Budweiser is all about responsible consumption. With Budweiser in China, for example, to your point about the Chinese numbers, we did with Yao Ming, now for the third or fourth year, a video that went viral about responsible consumption. If you're driving, don't drink. and he's the main character there together with some other people. 240 million people watch that video.
It's a big number.
Yes.
240 million
It's almost the size of the U.S.
Exactly.
That is a big number.
To your point, changes numbers.
Yeah,
But you have to do both.
Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with Carlos. You have to, we got to do both. Nobody wants to go to work for a company that doesn't have a purpose. And so every company has to have a purpose. We tell the Chinese companies that we're involved with or that we meet with, what's your culture? Do you have a culture? You have to have a culture, and you've got to have a purpose. We focus today on something that we think is very important as far as investing, and that's the ESG, environmental, societal, and governmental affairs. You can't just, in a vacuum, make investments and expect them to turn out well. You've got to be able to focus on the macro, and what can you do about environmental issues.
And have you been able to show that investments that have high environmental, social scores are better investments?
Oh, without a doubt. For example, in the U.S., we teamed up with the Environmental Defense Fund in 2007, and we said, let's try a test and see if we convert, say, 16 of our companies to focus more on recycling, focus on waste, on the water usage, and CO2 emissions, and we did. Well, in 2 years, we saved $1.6 billion in 16 companies just by better focus on how you use the assets that you have.
Yeah.
And water's not free.
That's the power of the and.
Yeah.
Do something that's good for the environment and it's good for business. So
and
because
you
it's
can
good
make
for
money.
business, you're going to do it.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Anyone have a question for these right here in the front, please? Can you bring the paddle down here to the...
Thank you. I have two questions. One is, what's the American sentiment towards China these days? Is it fear? Definitely not overjoyed, I guess, given all the high growth here. And, you can expand on that. And secondly is, what is President Trump's new tax plan going to impact on your individual business?
Well, let me take the last one first. The tax plan, assuming it actually passes, which it looks like it will at this point, has to be reconciled between the House and the Senate. Carried interest, for example, that is very important to us, which is the profit participation. That changes to a 3-year hold from no time limit before. Interest deduction will be limited to about 30% of EBITDA, and that'll affect. But then on the other side, you have corporate tax rates that are coming down from 35 stated to 20% stated, and that will offset some of that loss in tax shelter that you get from that. So net, we've run our numbers. It's not really going to make a huge difference in KKR's portfolio of companies there. As far as how does the U.S. think about China these days, look, it depends who you talk to. I can only talk for myself. I read what I read as far as President Trump and his concerns with the country. My own views are this is a phenomenal opportunity for people like us because so many companies need help, want to grow overseas. Example, we were a large shareholder in Haier, which is a big white goods business in China. They wanted to expand overseas. They couldn't figure out how to buy the GE appliance business. So we said, fine, we'll help you. And we ended up doing that. They bought it. Now they're much more of a global business. So we look at it very positively.
You have anything to add to that, Brito?
What I can tell you in terms of how our people, our company look at China. We're a Belgian company, by the way. We're a European company. I'm Brazilian. So, but what I can tell you from our company, when we started 30 years ago in China, China was always absorbing best practice from elsewhere. And they had no problem in learning from others, which is a great thing about our company here. But now, since many years ago, China is now exporting best practice.
Best practices are happening here.
Best practices are generated here and exporting to the rest of the world within our company. So it's a big shift.
Fascinating.
And it's fascinating. It's
Thank
great
you
to be here.
both. Thank you both. That's
Thanks so much.
a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't